watching Canadian Muslim news on Muslim Network TV from Toronto, Ontario. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. Today a conversation with Hena Zuberi, who is the Washington DC Director of Operations for Justice for All, about their campaign to end forced Uyghur labor in China. But first, some news headlines. Canadian oil and gas industry emissions targeted at COP26 summit. Toronto teacher sent home after wearing blackface Halloween costume. Acclaimed Muslim academic Mahmoud Ayoub passes away. Study finds the average Muslim American to be most generous in donations. And UN experts say 9 of 10 killings of journalists go unpunished. And now some details. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced major changes to curb emissions in the Canadian energy industry at the COP26 summit yesterday.
We'll cap oil and gas sector emissions today and ensure they decrease tomorrow at a pace and scale needed to reach net zero by 2050.
According to the CBC, Trudeau said that gas and oil sector emissions will be targeted to ensure there is a net zero output by 2050. Canada's oil and gas sector is the largest emissions industry, with transportation following closely behind. In 2019 alone, Canada's greenhouse gas emissions accounted for 26% of global emissions. There have been calls for Trudeau to be cautious with his approach, as the energy industry provides over 500,000 jobs to Canadians. The Toronto District School Board placed a teacher on home assignment after he wore blackface Halloween costume to school. Otis Stang, a student in grade 9, was shocked to find his teacher wearing blackface as part of his Halloween costume. He was even more confused when he saw that no one had confronted the teacher for his misconduct. Stang's mother called the school regarding the incident to demand action. The principal apologized for the incident and sent home a letter saying the costume was racist and dehumanizing. The teacher has been placed on home leave and is pending investigation. Renowned scholar and academic Mahmoud Mustafa Ayoub passed away yesterday in Montreal. Ayoub was an acclaimed Shia scholar. He was one of the founding members of the first chair for Shia studies in North America at Hartford International University in the US, formerly known as Hartford Seminary. Ayoub was also a key member in interreligious dialogue and received the 2012 Distinguished Scholar Award from the International Institute of Islamic Thought. He wrote several books, including Redemptive Suffering in Islam, a study of the devotional aspects of Ashura in 12 Shiism in the Middle Ages, which remains a classic in academia. A study conducted by the Muslim Philanthropy Initiative at Indiana University with Islamic Relief USA showed that Muslim Americans are on average more generous than other populations. For both faith-based and non-faith-based causes, Muslim Americans spend an average of $700 per year more than non-Muslims. According to the Chronicle of Philanthropy, co-author of the study Sharik Siddiq said that donation figures like that are not surprising. He says that because Muslims want to represent their communities, they are more generous in their donations when there is a rise in hate crimes. And in a joint statement on International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists, the UN experts called on countries to investigate violence against journalists and prosecute the perpetrators. The UN experts said that 9 out of 10 killings of journalists continue to go unpunished. Threats to the safety of journalists have taken new forms in the digital age, especially for women. Female journalists are at a higher risk of sexual attacks and online gender-based violence, including online harassment, rape, and death threats. According to UNESCO, 62 journalists around the world were killed last year just for doing their jobs. And now a conversation with Hena Zuberi about forced Uyghur labor in China. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Hena. Welcome to the show.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for having me.
We're focusing on ending forced Uyghur labor campaign that you've been part of. So for people who aren't aware, what is the situation? What should we know about this issue?
Well, thank you so much for bringing this very important issue. Uyghurs are essentially being kept as enslaved labor in East Turkestan, a region that is known by as Xinjiang, which means new territory that China is occupying. Um, Hundreds and thousands of Uyghurs, millions, are in what the Chinese government is calling educational camps. But once they leave the educational camps, they go into forced labor prisons. And there they are being used to create the wigs Americans and Canadians are using, Nike shoes, Gap t shirts. Carter baby clothing. When we walk into Costco and we're buying pajamas for our babies, these are being made by Uyghur mothers whose babies have been taken away from them.
I was going to ask you that, what kind of products. We did a story on the news a few days ago about tomato products and tomato paste that was being produced with forced Uyghur labor. How do we know that this is from them, these products?
So currently, the United States government has, through the research that has been conducted in Australia, the Australian Social Policy Institute, ASPI, has conducted research. The supply chains right now from that region are absolutely tainted. This is a congressional report that was done by the China coalition in the US government. And many other research organizations, including ours, has been looking into the supply chains. These supply chains are tainted because there's no way, the way people find out if the supply chain is tainted or not is that inspectors are sent in to factories to question workers. And this is impossible in that region.
Mm.
And if they do get to go into a region where many Uyghurs have been pulled out of East Turkestan and taken into mainland China, so even if those factories are not located in East Turkestan, they are being used as forced labor, and they're threatened. So we cannot base our supply chain audits on their testimony because they're being threatened by their lives. There's a genocide being taking place in that region where their family and friends and neighbors all are in under the watchful eye of the Chinese Communist Party.
And these forced labor factories that aren't in the province, are there other communities as well that are being enforced? Or is it just the Uyghur?
Well, I can say this, that the Tibetans have been persecuted for many, many decades by the Chinese Communist Party. But as we look at forced labor, obviously, and there is forced, very, very cheap labor that the Chinese government uses its own population. But Uyghurs are especially used. We have seen evidence of actual trading being done on web applications where Uyghurs are shown as strong and healthy because they don't drink alcohol and they don't smoke. So they're shown as strong workers and who can work for long hours. So this particular campaign is focused on Uyghur labor.
Okay, so the campaign, I believe that Justice for All is part of a worldwide campaign. It's called End Uyghur Forced Labour, with over 400 civil society organizations from 40 different countries. Can you tell us a little bit about who's helping organize this group, who's in charge, or what kind of activities you've been doing, what kind of advocacy, and where you're directing your advocacy, to which governments?
Okay, thank you for that question. So this coalition is absolute. It's been powerful. We have coalition members in France, in the UK, Canada, Taiwan, around the world, and it's being led by labor groups. So labor groups who know that this is a labor issue as well. It's a human rights issue. It's a labor rights issue. And so they have been in the lead. Uyghur organizations have been in the lead. Uyghur-led organizations have been in the lead. And some of the things that have been done is targeted campaigns against H&M, against Zara, These are fast fashion companies that are using Uyghur enslaved labor. We've had a French politician, Raphael. He's been absolutely incredible in using social media and targeting these companies. And there's a list of companies, 83 companies that have been put out. Who Volkswagen is another targeted company, because Volkswagen, even from the time of the genocide of the Jews in Germany, has always been on the side of the genociders. So Volkswagen is another company that is being targeted.
So you're targeting companies. Are you organizing a consumer boycott?
Yes, so consumer boycott of at least those 83 companies that are on ASPI's list. We also, on Eid, for example, we urge the Muslim community not to buy their Eid presents from those companies. So every one of the coalition members have been using their own tactics to appeal to their own community members. Justice for All has a Fast from China campaign that we've been running for 3 years, where in Ramadan we ask people to fast from China and not to buy, because we often hear, oh, everything's made in China, so we have to get, it's really hard. So we ask people, at least during the month of Ramadan, not to purchase anything that has been made in China.
And do you think that works? Are people responding to those kinds of boycott campaigns?
We've had some wins. For example, the largest publisher of the Quran in North America has pulled out of that region and now gets his Qurans published in Turkey instead of China. Another campaign that was another Hijabican is another American modest fashion wear, and they've started building their factory back in North Carolina instead of importing hijabs and modest wear from China.
So that's on the consumer side. And what about on the government side? There's an act that you've been trying to get passed through the US government. Tell us about that.
Yes, this is the Uyghur Forced Labour Prevention Act. It's a bipartisan law which aims to ensure that goods that are made with forced labor into East Turkestan do not enter the United States market. The bill addresses gross violations of human rights against Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims through targeted sanctions, export restrictions, and import controls. Now, the fascinating thing about forced labor has always been outlawed in the United States, but what this bill does is puts the onus on companies themselves to prove that their supply chains are not tainted with enslaved labor. And it gives them within 30 days, all goods manufactured or produced in that region would be prohibited from importation into the United States.
And so has that become law, that act that you've been working on?
Through different iterations of this bill, it's passed Senate, it's passed House, but the House and the Senate could not agree on the same version. So now the version that passed the House has passed the Senate. And now we're waiting for the U.S. Congress to pass it again. Unfortunately, during this time, major companies like Apple and Nike, Google have been activated, and they are lobbying the United States government. Coca-Cola is another one of them, to stop this act from being passed. So it's a long battle ahead.
That was going to be my next question, if there was a China lobby going against the act. But now you've talked about other multinational companies based from the US that are going against the act. Well, why do you think they're doing that? Why wouldn't they want to stand on the side of justice and ending forced labor?
Dollars. They're going to lose money. Chinese labor is inexpensive. They fear that the Chinese government might retaliate by pulling their licenses. And many of us, unfortunately, are dependent on the Chinese market to manufacture the goods that we use every day. And also, I believe it's also that the reason why you can sell goods from China, why if you had the same good produced in the United States or Argentina, or even let's talk about Nigeria, why is it more cheaper to produce it in China? Precisely so, because labor over there is either forced or paid so cheaply that they can afford to compete and we can't.
Right. I mean, there's probably not a lot of difference from being in a very, 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 very low wage company housing unit and forced labor. their sort of equivalent. Unfortunately, we don't have time to delve into this more, but we thank you for coming on the show. We thank you for your activism in throwing the spotlight on this, and we pray that these people find justice and freedom soon.
Well, thank you so much for having me on.
That's it from us. You've been watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Stay safe, stay tuned for the next episode, and God bless.